All right, welcome and good evening to tonight's episode of the Mike Sennello Show. Today we've got one item on the agenda, and that's the American Rescue Plan Act and the funding that's come to New Milford as a result of its passing. So before we get started, we got to get a bunch of things out of the way before we get started into tonight's conversation. Yes, we will get to live Q&A at the end of our conversation, so get those questions ready. Type them in if you don't want to have to remember them, and we'll get to your questions at the end here. So before we get started, first things first, welcome everyone from my YouTube channel. Welcome everyone from my Facebook channel. If you are looking to participate, if you'd prefer to watch on Facebook and you're in on YouTube, link is in this video's description. You'll probably have to hit the refresh button to get the video to actually load because Facebook Live. If you're also on Facebook and you would prefer to watch on YouTube where you can watch in full 1080p, the link is to that broadcast is in this video's description as well. Also, since tonight we are going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan Act, Joe DiGregorio and I talked about this on our July 25th show in pedantic detail. So if you really want to get a full detail as to what the American Rescue Plan Act is and what's involved with all of that money and how we've gotten to the point where we are today, check that out. I'll put the link to that video in this. I'll put the link to that in the Facebook comments right now, so you guys can check that out. Excuse me, that's the wrong link, I think. No, that's the correct link. That is the correct link. A lot of what we're also going to be talking about is on my YouTube is backed up by things I've discussed on the video on my YouTube channel, the truth about spending in public schools, what works and what doesn't. So I've got numerous sources that I've cited in this. This is something that took months of research. So anytime you hear something that might need a citation when it comes to public education, this is a good primer. Again, I'll put that in the description in the YouTube video links. Excuse me, I'm actually in the wrong. It would not be. So I'll put this. So this right now is the link to that YouTube video, the truth about spending in public schools, what works and what doesn't. And I'll go ahead and put the link to the live show from July 25th into the Facebook comments as well. Again, thanks for everyone that's tuning in from both Facebook and YouTube. Right now, I don't have a great way of doing of simulcasting the comments in Facebook and YouTube. Speaking of which, previously I mentioned that I would like to start doing more work on Odyssey. We do have to have a brief conversation about that, since I would love to back things up on an actual platform, which Odyssey is, rather than a publication, which Facebook and YouTube are. So, brief conversation about Odyssey. It seems to me that it's a useful backup, but buffering has become a huge problem, as you guys have all noticed from home, and there seems to be no fix other than to build from the ground up a series of macro scripts, etc., into my editing software and with the library desktop app to force transcoding. So, what we're talking about is paying a computer engineer and a software tech to team up together and spend months rebuilding from nothing. So if you guys have any experience with Odyssey and getting around Odyssey's buffering issue, please let me know. Please put your information in the comment section, either on YouTube or on Facebook, and let's have a conversation. So yeah, like I said, I will be streaming to YouTube and Facebook tonight. Candidates. Since this is about that season, this is election season here in New Milford, Connecticut. So candidates who are seeking elected public office, please reach out to me looking to schedule interviews. I've already reached out to a number of people. I've already basically booked a few people. We're just working out timing and dates and technicals. So if you're running for, say, town council or zoning or planning or Board of Education, reach out to me. Love to interview you. And again, I'll interview Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, libertarians. Folks, if you are a guest on my show, I will treat you like a guest on my show with civility and decency. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to give you the questions in advance, and that doesn't mean that the questions aren't going to be really hard. So if you are a candidate seeking public office, reach out to me. Love to have you on the show. And that's what we're going to be having in the near future. So back to the main topic for tonight. What is the American Rescue Plan Act? In very brief, the most cynical take is a grab bag full of loot taken from you, the taxpayer, so that someone else can spend it on whatever interest they have. To the tune of roughly $7.9 million, the BOE is the Board of Ed, is going to be getting roughly $2.5 million. And you'll be able to offer your input on how you think other people's money should be spent tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. in the E. Paul Martin Room, 10 Main Street here in New Milford. So do go to that meeting. It's a public meeting that's going to be held prior to the town council meeting tomorrow night at 6:30. Give them your thoughts, because this is the first real opportunity for them to hear you in person. There has been a survey that went around. It's now closed. I'm still looking for where the results of that survey are and where that can be found. So if you know where those results are and where they can be found, go ahead and dump them in the comments section now. Please do share this video so it gets out, because not only we're going to be going over the information, though we're not going to be going over it in anywhere near the detail we went in that previous video that I mentioned with Joe DiGregorio, which, by the way, you can find here. That's what that looks like. That's our previous video with Joe DiGregorio. And like I mentioned, the link is in the top of this description here. And we can go over to the next tab to go to the truth about spending in public schools, what works and what doesn't. So those are the two videos that I said you guys should check out. One is on my YouTube channel. One is on my Facebook page. So please do check out those videos as a primer to get you better acquainted with this topic, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is going to have some relation, at least, to public spending in public education. So the question with the American Rescue Plan Act, more than anything, is what can that money legally be spent on? Of course, the better question is, what can't it legally be spent on? Again, we went over this in great detail in a previous video with Joe DiGregorio, but the most obvious thing you would think to do with this money would be just as a handout and effectively damages to the taxpayers for money printer go burr monetary policy, which this is, which would equate to a tax cut. So we're going to be talking about how you would spend your finances in the home, because it's exactly the same thing. It translates financial savvy in the home is the same financial savvy that translates to financial savvy in the business world, is the same financial savvy that translates to financial savvy in the public sector when it comes to town policy, when it comes to town finance. So the first thing you would want to do is get this money into the individual's hands. To me, this is effectively like damages, because what we did with money printer go burr monetary policy is took every dollar that is in your wallet. So if you own a dollar, what we did is we damaged that dollar so it's worth nowhere near what it was worth even a year or two ago today. I've experienced that on the side. I do some landscaping, and the price that I have to charge my clients for aerations and overseeds has full on doubled since last year, because the price of seed has doubled. The rental prices have almost doubled. So that's, to me, the way I would treat this, is as a damage. Get it into the individual's hands. We're going to relate this to a lottery ticket. In the case of, if you win the lottery, it doesn't go to some conglomerate, it doesn't go to some group's hands who gets to decide how you wind up getting the benefit of that. No, it goes straight into your pocket. You get to do whatever you want with it. And let's say that when you hit the lottery, in this case, for the case of this thought experiment, we're talking like $50,000. Not enough to retire on. So $7.9 million isn't $100 quadrillion. It's not enough for the town to say, well, we're going to get gold-plated everything now because we have an infinite supply of money and there's no need to control how we spend that money on. So, like I said, the first thing that comes to mind is just to issue it out effectively as damages. We took this money from you and we ruined the value of the dollar as a result of it. So, as damages in a civil suit. So, if we're talking about tailors, if somebody drove their truck through the hardware store walls, obviously you would sue that idiot for driving his truck through the walls, not only for the damages as a direct result of repairing the front of the entryway, of repairing those walls and repairing the computers that were destroyed, but also as a result of the lost revenue, because you, say, had to shut down tailors in the meantime while at least some of this construction was completed. So in this case, this would be damages that we would be suing for in our home and in our business life, and damages that we would be receiving from the Fed. But we can't do this. We can't do this because the way you would do that is basically as either a tax offset for the coming years, or is just a tax refund where you take, say, there's 28,000 people in this town, and I would estimate between 9 and 10,000 tax receipts. So you divide 7.9 million by 9 to 10,000, however many tax filings there were, and just issue it out. Let the taxpayer spend that money how they choose to spend that money. And we would actually be introducing, in this case, market influences back into that spending, which is always a good thing. So you can't do that. You can't use this as a tax offset. You can't use this as a tax refund. Pete Bass explained this in the July one of the 2 July town council meetings.
Now, there are guardrails for this money. So first is you can't reduce taxes with it. As I said before, you cannot use this to offset taxes.
Can you go rainy day fund at all with it?
What's that? You cannot. No. So you have to spend the money.
So you have to spend the money. Well, what's the most obvious way to spend the money in this case? If it was your home and you hit the lottery to the tune of $50,000, the very, very first thing you would do, of course, is spend it on debt reconciliation. Dave Ramsey would tell you this. If you have any money, whatever debts you have, if you have a mortgage on the house or if you have a loan out on the car, just dump the whole thing into that. And that's actually true. Now, the way he suggests to do this is to, get the little things done first, just to get them done. And from a strictly financial standpoint, that's actually not true. You'd probably rather spend it on the mortgage because of how the interests work out. But from a mental standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, you need to have a win. So in this case, in order to garner that win, Dave Ramsey would recommend getting rid of the little things first and then tackling the big things after that. But the point is, you hit that $50,000, you scratch off $50,000, you dump it right into debt reconciliation. The other thing you would spend it on, if that's not the case, then of course, is to put it in a long-term investment fund. If you've got no debt, invest it. Well, you can't do that because there is a 4-year timeline, a 4-year window that we have to pay this off. This is just like we talked about with Joe DiGregorio on that July 25th meeting, and Pete Bass explains that thusly.
Is there a deadline on when these funds have to be spent by?
So we have, I believe, 4 years to do these.
So you can't put aside a fund and fund something for 20 years with that money? No. So 4 years, that's it. Okay.
Then we could adjust our budget for next year and use this money to, no? You can't lower your budget.
You can't use it for tax relief.
So you can't use it for tax relief. You can't squirrel away funds. You can't save any of this money. You can't get around that loophole. And like I mentioned, you can't pay off debt. Like I said, these are the 2 things that would make the absolute most sense in the home, and the 3 things that when it comes to the town that would make to me the most obvious sense from a financial standpoint. Right, if you're taking a finance course, if you're graduating from Binghamton University's prestigious School of Management, and you're going to have, and you want to produce a thesis that shows that you have some skill and talent, experience in finance and accounting, and actuarial experience, when you have a general good sense of business, these are the avenues that would make the most sense. Of course, you can't spend it on paying off bonding. Mike Nahom, praise him, who has been the most based town councilman in the last few months, and I'm loving you, Mike. Mike Nahom asks this question and gets this answer.
When you talk about infrastructure, can you pay off the bond at the sewer?
No. Those are the guidelines that we gotta look at. And
be very careful about that stuff.
Just checking.
So you can't spend that on any of the things that make sense. All right. So the last thing in the home, if you get that $50,000 check from the state of Connecticut from the lottery, right? You scratch off $50,000. You can't pay it on, you have no debt. Or let's say you can't pay it on to pay down debt, right? It doesn't go into your hands. It goes into somebody else's hands who's making these decisions. You can't invest it in your long-term savings or an IRA. So then the next thing that comes to mind is known capital expenses. So if you're in the home, let's say you've been putting off the roof for a while. Let's say you've been putting off replacing a septic tank. Well, these are huge, colossal expenses that you can't avoid actually spending, and it can't avoid as an expense, but you can delay them for a little bit until you have the money. Well, you can't do that either. So if it comes to things like the town, like spending it on known capital expenses, a boiler that we know is coming up, you can't do that either. And you can't do that either for the reasons we mentioned before, and also because this is not a wish list, as our town attorney Randy DeBella explains. Let's be clear, this is not a wish list.
Randy?
Mayor, I think, I don't mean to be Simon LeGree here, but I received the code of federal regulations today on this, and I'm analyzing it now. I spent a few hours already analyzing it. It's not something that's going to be a wish list.
Absolutely.
I'm not raining on anybody's parade.
No.
The fact is that it's got to be expended within a certain period of time, as Councilman
4 years.
Vice Chair stated. And it has to be at least arguably related to a COVID-impacted matter. Housing, you talk about housing, you talk about people who are unemployed, you talk about food assistance, childcare, things of that nature. So I think when you have your public hearing, they need to understand it is not a wish list.
Right.
So this is not a wish list. This is never intended to be a wish list. So, since we've been going through this for a few weeks and maybe a few months, here, folks, is the wish list. And bear with me, folks, this is long.
And so far, it's kind of a summary. These are the ones so far. Health Department, this is to provide additional services to our town. The request from our health director was for about $240,000. Our New Milford Senior Center's Advisory Board, as we talked about at the last meeting, this was money that they gave in short order for the differential, when instead of the seniors going into the senior center to get food, actually during COVID they were delivered, and the state could not give us the additional funding. So I'm asking for $71,137.75 to go back to the Senior Center Advisory Board. The New Milford Fire Marshal has asked for $15,900 for their backpacks, and this was the primary residence loan for capital repairs. Also, generators for our senior housing, for the workforce housing fund that we've created. Some money's to be put in there. Also, economic development, workforce training and development. Also, look at broadband. The other one too is the first responder and critical worker stipends. Also, foreclosure and rental assistance. Next is also the assistance to the arts community. My recommendation to the town council would be for $125,000 to the arts community. Also, nonprofit assistance. I'm asking for $125,000 to the nonprofits. Business and loan grants. And these are grants that we could make to our business community. Also, we've been in talks with a company called Kiva, K-I-V-A. And what Kiva does is it is a crowdfunding source business financing platform. It's a $20,000 investment to become what they call a hub, a regional hub, and there is none in this area. So New Milford would be the regional hub for Kiva. Next is, if you take a look at the American Relief Funds, the opportunity for infrastructure. Another one is wastewater treatment. An amount at our next town council meeting that will allow assistance with the connection fees for hookups. Another part two is actual COVID-19 recovery. We're not out of COVID yet. So to me, we need to put some money aside in case we do have another issue. So another thing I'd like to tack is domestic violence. So I would like the town council to approve a 2-year test period for a new position that would be housed within the Social Services Department, but be tethered to the Milford Police Department, which would be a domestic violence advocate. The next one is the New Milford ambulance. We had an older part of our population that was manning the ambulance for many, many years, and we're seeing that that's turning into a paid service. The thing that I'm here tonight to talk about is the new equipment that's going to be needed on the ambulance. The next is, we talked about before, is affordable housing. The next is riverfront revitalization. So it'd be the availability to get this matching grant. The minimum grant that you can apply for is $1 million. So I would be asking for the town council to put $500,000 into this. Also, we talked a little bit before about telecommunications and continuing the dialogue with all of our carriers. So one of the things to do is look to partner with those agencies, those businesses, to see if we can, and they're working on them now, but they're looking at kind of going from the metro cities out. But if there's a way we can help incentivize them to help New Milford, and that could be not only in a monetary way, but it could be an administrative way. Also, a Brownsfield grant.
So there it is, folks. There is your endless wish list of things that we're going to spend this grab bag full of loot on. Now, my way of thinking is that if that money wasn't already, so that money came from you, the taxpayer, which means that in order to have that money be spent in the most effective and efficient manner, what you do is you seek You seek to increase liberty. You seek to expose those expenditures to market influences. In this case, you let the individual people make these decisions with their wallets, because you're not going to get every single person to show up to vote. You're not going to get individualized decision making when it comes to the town council who makes these discretionary decisions. The only way to get those decisions to be made like that, and in a way that axiomatically and self-evidently promotes the best decisions when it comes to the individuals, or the decisions that at least best serve the individual's personal interests, is to let these people make these decisions with their wallets. This is otherwise, just like I've said before, picking favorites with other people's money. And government should be getting out of the business of picking favorites. I said this before when I talked about the smearing of Paul Zemansky, that if you're opposed to the government picking favorites when it comes to the passage of that ordinance that allowed that tax deferral for businesses such as, Paul Zemansky was presenting a plan to open up a storage facility on Route 7 just north of Big Y, which is just south of the storage facility that got approved for this with crickets as the response. Just a few months before that. Yeah, if you're opposed to all of those deferrals, because that is just picking favorites, as in you're giving a tax deferral to the new businesses as opposed to the old businesses, then I'm kind of with you. Government shouldn't be in the business of picking favorites. And by the way, if you're wondering why prices, like I mentioned, are exploding, this is it. This is it right here, right? This is government interfering with mutually consensual transactions. This is Smith's lesson. This is basic econ. If you want this money to be spent in the most efficient and most lossless manner possible, again, you expose everything to you maximize market influences. You maximize mutual consent in these transactions, which means it should be going into the taxpayer's hands in some manner. Period. It should be going into your wallet, period. If you want to sign that check to the town, if you want to then spend that money how you want to spend it, that's fine. If you want to take that money and just write a check out to the town of Milford, you can do that. If you just want to write a check out to the Board of Ed, you can do that. So for those of you who want this money to be spent on, say, just completely defer to the Board of Education, then yeah, that's your money at that point. If we again take that $7.9 million and divide by 9,900 to 10,000 somewhere in there, IRS forms, then yeah, whatever that works out to, that check you can do whatever you want with, and you can take that money if you want and just hand it over to the Board of Ed. You're free to do that. You're free to just set it on fire if that's what you want to do. If you have a wood stove, you're free to take that check and just hurl it in the wood stove. If that's where you guys stand, then say so tomorrow night. If you guys agree with me, say so tomorrow night. The whole point of tonight's broadcast is to get you guys that are on board with me to show up to these meetings, to go to tomorrow night's meeting at 6:30 p.m. in the town meeting at 6:30 p.m. in the town E. Paul Martin room. And you got to get there a few minutes in advance so you can sign up for public comment and let the town council know that you agree with me. Let, if nothing else, the Republicans know that you agree with what is supposed to be supply-side economics, which Republicans are ostensibly supposed to stand for. Of course, how about the Democrats? Well, we have their opinion here on how this should be spent. This is Dave Lawson from the August 9th, 2021 meeting.
I just wanted to make some comments on your list there.
Absolutely.
First of all, with the first responders and critical workers, I think we should consider the teachers as well. They went through a heck of a year last year, and this year isn't looking too promising either. They basically had to rewrite their curriculums 2-3 times, and coupled with technical issues, because you're making the assumption that everybody in all the students have technical computers at home, which may be true, but they may not have them available. So, these are some of the things I think we really need to, rather than say we support our critical workers, that we support our first responders, and we support our teachers. Let's show them that we do that.
Teachers aren't first responders. First responders are people that directly act in a response to a thing. They are the front line in the closest thing to a literal sense as you possibly can get. First responders are EMTs, EMS crews. They are the ones that first respond to the scene actively. These aren't passive responses. If we were relating to this to war, the people that are on the front line are the people actually getting shot at. It's not the people in the factories building the ammunition here in the United States. It's not even the people that are working in the hospital tents, say, overseas. Let's say we're relating this to World War II. If we're talking about the Battle of the Bulge, we've already completed our invasion of Normandy. The Normandy invasion has been successful. We've worked our way into France. We're about to get into Belgium, and we're talking about the Battle of the Bulge at this point. The field workers still on the beaches of Normandy are not the front line, are not the members of the front line. These are not our frontline soldiers. So, no, I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Teachers are not first responders. They're also self-evidently not critical workers, if you will, as evidenced by the fact that they shut themselves down last year. Truckers didn't. Big Y workers didn't. A whole bunch of people didn't shut down. Tailors didn't. None of the hardware stores shut down. But the teachers were the first ones to say, we don't want to show up to work. We want to still get paid to not work. Something that if the Big Y employees went over to Big Y and said, the Big Y would say, yeah, go ahead and go home. You get $0 an hour. And then we'll just find somebody else and we'll pay them. And if it has to be more than what we're paying you now, then we'll pay them more because we want to stay open. Because critical workers, if they were critical, you would have said, the Board of Education, all of the teachers unions would have said, no, we're critical workers. We want to stay open. If we actually said that, listen, this is how important education is, that we have to have learning in the classroom. This is how important learning in the classroom is, that we have to have our teachers there. This is how important public education is, the way we've done it for decades, if not centuries. If that's what you're actually arguing, then that's where this goes. But of course, this is all just completely irrelevant because the Board of Education is getting their own allotment that the municipal government has no say whatsoever over. They're getting their $2.5 million. Do you want to remain bifurcated or not? Chris Cosgrove, bless his soul again, points this out. This is from the September 13th meeting.
The schools are getting their own American relief funding
They're getting
as well, right?
2.5 million.
Yeah, okay.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to say is this is a community that we've consistently cut their funding. They're putting in their programming that they need to do. That's where their $2.5 million is going.
Okay.
Let's look at it, what we're talking about. What I'm talking about with, what do we have? 250 in town employees, and not all of them would be eligible. So
I would say, Dave, I would say every town employee that
Okay,
worked
so
through
let's go-
COVID is in my opinion, was a critical worker.
okay, so we are talking about 250 and about 300 in the school side. So you're talking 250,000 out of 7.9 million. I think that says a lot from us that we support all of the critical workers, regardless of the agencies that they're affiliated with.
It never ends. If they're critical workers, if they're supposedly critical workers, and they're self-evidently not by their own standards, then who isn't? Who doesn't constitute a critical worker? Mike Nahom, who owns the club in town, right? The gym in town. Why was he shut down for months? Why was he forced by government to shut down? This is not of his own volition. This is not his union of workers going to him and saying, we need to shut down. We want to go home and get paid to somehow work at a gym and not be there. Why was he forced to shut down? Right? And here's why I say this. Because so far from what is indicative of the data, right? The thing that will help you avoid any serious and long-term effects from COVID is being in shape. Being in shape. Because you can't control for age, right? I'm 35. I will be 36 next year. There's no way to avoid that. I can't be 26 next year. I can't be 25 next year, right? So since we can't control for that, the thing I can actually do for my body is start eating right. is get on the treadmill. The thing that Mike Nahom's business does. If people who get to decide of their own volition to just go home, right? If bargaining units who are bargaining against our own interests by their very nature, right? That's who they're bargaining against. By the way, they're bargaining against you and me. They're bargaining against the representatives we elected into those offices. If they're critical workers, then how in the hell are Mike Nahom's employees not critical workers? Who in the hell is not a critical worker at that point? And by the way, this nonsense, first things first, do you want to be bifurcated or not? Because right now the Board of Education and the town council are bifurcated bodies. There's extremely little oversight over what the Board of Education does from the position of the legislative arm of the town, which is an extension of the legislative arm of the town, which is the town council. So do you want to be bifurcated or not? Because to me, if there ever becomes a time when, and there's no limiting principle here. What if what was being handed out to the Board of Education wasn't $2.5 million? What if it was $100 quadrillion, Dave? 100 quadrillion. Board of Ed gets to do whatever they want with that, Dave? Or would you then say, yeah, maybe some of that $100 quadrillion, the money, all of the value of all of the productivity and all of human history, right? If that sum was handed over to the Board of Education, do you think some of that should go then instead to the town council? Is there a limiting principle here? No, there isn't. There just isn't. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But at the same time, no, debunked. There has never been a budget cut to the Board of Education's budget. This is just basic finance. Basic finance. The dollar amount from year to year has never gone down. That's what a budget cut is. The dollar amount approved at referendum, by the way, by you and I, the voters. This isn't something that's being handed down heavy-handed from town council or from the mayor's office. No. You and I, the voters, vote on these budgets. They have never decreased from one year to the next, despite the fact that enrollment's gone down by something like 33%, right? Like something like a quarter to a third. And we've never once seen it go down. And by the way, there's a huge reason for that. And that is from Hartford. It is virtually impossible to get that budget number to go down. You have to meet an extraordinary list of conditions from Hartford in order to approve a budget that is actually less than the previous years. In order to send out to referendum a budget that is less than previous years. This is like middle school finance. This isn't even intro to financial methods. Finance 301. No. This is like middle school filling out a checkbook finance. And by the way, everything I just said is confirmed by Mary Jane Lundgren. This is from September 13th, 2021, one of the other Democrats on town council.
Mary
I
Jane?
want to say I like David Lawson's idea about giving the teachers additional funding. Even though they are getting some money, they are still so far behind from the budget cuts from prior years that for programs cuts. That I think it would be just a very generous, wonderful thing for us to do to show the support of the teachers.
These aren't budget cuts, not from any accounting, financial, or auditing standard. These are not budget cuts. And it was voted on by the public. This isn't something, again, like there's an opposition position into this matter. The only times the budget has failed is because the Board of Education side failed. In the last 20 years going back. I'm the one that produced that spreadsheet that showed all of that. It's on my Facebook channel. You guys can look it up under my photos. It's on there. Right? In the last 20 years, we've had zero budgets fail because of the municipal side of the budget. And the only time it's failed is because of the Board of Ed. And when did it finally pass? After the dollar amount went down from what was recommended at referendum. Just because you request a certain dollar amount and don't get it, that's not a budget cut. If you guys requested $100 quadrillion and that was reduced to $99 quadrillion, your budget did not decrease. That's not what a budget cut is. It's when you take an existing budget and you cut it, which again has, as far as I know, never happened. In the last 20 years, it's not happened. Again, despite massively declining enrollment. Well, I don't know what the result is of The enrollment study, from what I understand, it's going to come out soon. I'll be talking to the Board of Ed about that in the next coming days and weeks. But the point is, these are not budget cuts. And this is stuff you learn by filling out a checkbook in your freshman year of high school. This isn't accounting 201. This isn't managerial accounting. This isn't financial methods. This isn't corporate finance. This isn't personal finance. This is just things you learn in the real world. These are not budget cuts. This is coming from the same person that repeatedly vilified landlords with how she framed the housing moratorium. Fortunately, silver lining in all of this, fortunately, at the very least, we have a mayor that understands basic finance and economics when it comes to landlords. Go Pete Bass.
And also the landlord, who if they don't get rent, if they can't get rent, then they can't make their payment to their bank. And then we have that death spiral as we saw in 2008 with the Great Recession. We then began to see housing values go down because of foreclosures. And then what happens when they go down? Then people try and refinance or try to purchase. And the banks aren't going to lend on declining values. They won't.
So at least we have that. At least we have that. So the question, of course, now is, so what should we spend this on? What is the right and appropriate thing to spend this on? And I'm largely at a loss. To be honest with you, I'm not sure how what Mayor Bass what we just showed you from Mayor Bass doesn't constitute a wish list. I have no idea how that's not a wish list. And nor how half of those items meet the COVID criteria. I have no idea how you loop back half of those items to actually being some way related to COVID and COVID actual expenditures, not just ancillarily related to the disease itself or to the outbreak or to its spread or anything like that, but to the actual expenses shown therein. Now, that said, we, let's see. Yeah, no. So as far as the COVID criteria is concerned, there's something that we should consider here. And we're going to actually come back to this. I mentioned that I'm kind of at a loss as far as what to actually spend this on. I think Katie Francis is 100% right to say that what we need more than anything is for Randy DeBella to just, we need some real legal guidance on this. We need our town attorney to step up and just have a one-on-one and get this hammered out. What actually meets these criteria and what doesn't? Katie Francis, good on you for raising this point.
Mayor, I just have a question. Will we also, prior to our first and prior to the second meeting, just make sure that everybody, us included, and the
Absolutely.
public are aware of the guidelines, because there are very specific things, correct?
Yes.
That this money cannot be used for. So we want to make, rather than people going out of their way to mention something that might
Randy?
not.
The mayor tasked me to draft a memo on
Thank
that.
you, Randy.
I'm doing it now. We have much of it done. But there are a few things that I need to really delve into before I can give a definitive determination.
Right.
But it's almost done.
Thank you. Perfect. I just think that, we don't want to waste time,
Right.
thinking of important things
Mike?
that aren't allowed.
Damn straight, Katie Francis. And on that note, with the greatest degree of civility from somebody who has been very happy with what Randy DeBella has done for this town, here is my official formal invitation to Randy DeBella to come on to the show and have a lengthy conversation with your Q&A from home, with the audience's Q&A, about what this money can and cannot be spent on. I know that we're going to have the meeting tomorrow night. There is another one coming up in October.